Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be delving into a really heavy but crucial topic, um, Chair Lee Loughner and the 2011 Tucson shooting.
Right. A very, very difficult topic. And I think you and I have been looking through quite a lot of material.
We've got news reports, legal documents, background information, a lot to sort through.
Yeah, a real mix of sources.
Our goal is to really pull out the most important points, present
Mhm.
them to you guys in a way that's clear and understandable. So let's start, I guess, with the basics. Like, who exactly are we talking about?
Okay, so we're talking about Jared Lee Loughner. He was born in Tucson, Arizona, September 10th, 1988.
Born and raised in Tucson.
Yeah, and sadly, he's known for the mass shooting that took place there on January 2011.
A tragic day. 6 people lost their lives.
Yeah, a real mix of people. We lost Chief U.S. District Court Judge John Roll, Gig Zimmerman, who was on Gabby Giffords' staff, and then a young girl, Christina Taylor Greene. She was only 9 years old.
9 years old.
Hmm.
Awful. And 13 others were injured, right?
Yes, 13 people with gunshot wounds, including Representative Gabby Giffords, who was very critically injured.
And in all that chaos, someone else got hurt trying to stop Loughner.
That's right, a very brave individual.
So, using all these sources we have, we're going to dig into Loughner's life, his background, these personality changes, the people who knew him we're talking about. And then we'll get into the views he held, especially around things like conspiracy theories and religion.
Yeah, his beliefs really seem to play a role.
And of course, we'll break down the shooting itself and the legal proceedings that came after. Where do we even begin with all this?
Well, I think starting with Loughner's family background makes sense. He was an only child, raised by Randy and Amy Loughner, by all accounts a very private family.
Right, kept to themselves.
Exactly. Amy Loughner worked for the Pima County Parks Department as like a horticulturalist.
So plants and gardens and all that.
Exactly. And Randy Loughner was a retired truck driver. So, not a lot of information out there about their family life.
Okay, so then we look at Loughner's education. Dropped out of Mountain View High School in 2006,
Yeah.
and later he withdrew from Pima Community College.
Yeah. And around this time is when we start hearing about some pretty big personality changes.
Right, people were noticing.
Yeah. And it was mostly people who knew him from his younger years, around age 18.
Right, people who had known him for a while.
His ex-girlfriend from high school, Kelsey Hawks, she remembered him as this sweet, caring guy. Makes you think, what happened?
A drastic change.
Huge change. Then you have Tong Shan, a former classmate. She ran into him just a few months before the shooting, like October 2010.
So pretty recently.
Yeah. And she said he seemed very anti-government, but not violent or anything.
Huh. So maybe things escalated quickly.
Maybe. He definitely didn't
It-
mention buying a gun or anything to her.
And this whole personality shift thing, it wasn't just people's opinions. Like, it affected his work too, right?
Absolutely. He was fired from his job at Quiznos. His manager said it was because of a huge personality transformation.
Oh, wow.
And he tried volunteering at an animal shelter, but they asked him not to come back. He just wasn't following instructions.
Couldn't really function in those everyday settings.
Yeah. And then there's the drug use. Zach Osler, one of his friends from high school, said Loughner started using a lot of drugs and alcohol.
After a breakup.
Yeah, after a breakup. He was doing cannabis, cocaine, even psychedelic mushrooms, LSD, and salvia divinorum.
Wow, that's a lot.
Katie Parker, another former classmate, remembers him as a heavy pot smoker.
So this wasn't just hearsay.
Oh no, he was arrested in 2007 for having marijuana and paraphernalia.
Okay, so there's actual evidence of drug use.
Yeah. Though, to be fair, a longtime friend said he stopped all that recreational stuff in 2008.
So a couple years before the shooting.
Exactly. But then there's this other thing. He tried to join the army in 2008, but they rejected him.
Because of marijuana use.
Yeah, he admitted to using it. You have to wonder, did that rejection contribute to his, his state of mind?
Possibly another blow. And around this time, his parents were getting really worried, weren't they?
Very worried. They were disabling his car at night so he couldn't go out.
So they were trying to control his behavior.
Yeah. And his dad took away his shotgun. They even wanted him to see a psychiatrist.
That's a serious level of concern.
Definitely. And to make things even stranger, there are reports that he was obsessed with lucid dreaming, like trying to control his dreams.
That's a little unsettling.
Yeah, maybe sign he was detaching from reality. Okay, so let's move on to his time at Pima Community College.
Yeah, where things really took a turn for the worse.
Absolutely. From February to September 2010, campus police were called about him 5 times.
5 times.
Yeah.
In just, what, 8 months?
Yeah. He was disrupting classes, acting weird in the library. Teachers were complaining.
What kind of behavior are we talking about?
Some were worried he was mentally ill. One even said later that they thought he might do a school shooting.
Oh my God. So the warning signs were there.
It seems so. And he posted this YouTube video saying that the college was illegal, like breaking the Constitution, called it a scam.
So pretty delusional thinking.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what got him suspended. The college contacted his parents and said they needed to meet and figure things out.
So they were trying to intervene?
Yeah, and they told him he needed to get a mental health evaluation before he could come back to school.
To make sure he was, safe to be around other students.
Exactly, but he never got that evaluation.
Did he end up going back?
No. He withdrew from Pima Community College on October 4th after that meeting with the administrators and his parents.
Wow, so less than 4 months before the shooting.
Yeah. And, we have these accounts from his classmates about how disturbing his behavior was in class. One woman talked about having an abortion, and he just started mocking her.
Awful.
Yeah, saying things about terrorism and killing the baby. He even talked about strapping a bomb to a fetus. Just really dark, messed up stuff.
Clearly not thinking straight.
Definitely not. And we have to talk about his views, his political views, his beliefs about the world, because those seem to play a big part in all of this.
So politically, where did he stand?
Well, he was registered as an independent. He voted in 2006 and 2008, but not in 2010.
Huh, interesting. So he was participating in the system to some extent.
Yeah. But Zach Osler, his friend, said that Loughner didn't really watch TV or listen to news or political radio. He wasn't, on one side or the other.
Okay, so not a typical politically engaged person.
Right. But then you have Brace Tierney, another friend.
Yeah.
He said that Loughner really disliked Gabby Giffords, had for a long time.
Why was that?
Tierney said Loughner thought women shouldn't be in power and called Giffords a fake all the time.
Really hostile.
Yeah. And apparently it got worse after a public event in 2007. Loughner asked Giffords a question, "What is government if words have no meaning?" And he didn't like her answer. Or maybe she didn't even answer him, I'm not sure.
So he felt dismissed.
Yeah, and he kept her thank you letter from that event, but he'd written things on it like "die bitch" and assassination plans have been made.
That's so chilling.
It really is. And he was also angry at President Bush. So he was focusing his rage on specific people.
Not just a vague anger at the government.
Right. And then you add in the conspiracy theories. Loughner's friend Zach Osler said they had a big impact on him. He was part of the above top secret message board online.
So he was spending time in those communities.
Oh, yeah. And he believed all kinds of stuff. The 9/11 attacks were an inside job. The New World Order was controlling everything. The world was going to end in 2012.
A whole 9 yards of conspiracy theories.
Pretty much. And the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, they looked at his writings and said there was this theme of distrust in government, just a general dislike of authority.
So it all tied together.
Yeah, he thought the government controlled language to brainwash people, that they were making infinite currency out of thin air, that NASA faked the moon landing, and the ADL said his language was similar to stuff you'd find on extremist websites.
So that online world was feeding his paranoia.
It seems so. Now, let's talk about religion. Loughner was described as an anti-theist. He didn't put down a religion on his Army application, and in this video he called final thoughts. He literally says, "No, I don't trust in God."
So no belief in a higher power.
Not at all. And apparently he disliked all religions, especially Christianity.
Now, some people wondered if he was anti-Semitic, since Gabby Giffords is Jewish.
Right, but the ADL, after looking at everything, they said he seemed to just dislike religion in general. It wasn't specifically about Jewish people.
So more broad rejection of religion.
Yeah, though there is a police report mentioning that Loughner might have been involved with some anti-abortion graffiti that was linked to Christian groups.
Okay, so that adds another layer to it.
Yeah.
Now, how about the shooting itself? What do we know about what happened that day?
Well, first of all, we know he bought the gun he used legally. It was a 9mm Glock pistol. He bought it on November 30th, 2010.
So about a month and a half before the shooting?
Yeah. And the night before the shooting, he left a really weird voicemail for a friend. Just said, "Hey, man, it's Jared. Me and you had good times. Peace out. Later."
Kind of a goodbye message almost.
It does sound like that. And then on the morning of January 8th, like 4 a.m., he posts this disturbing message on MySpace.
Like a final statement.
Kinda, he said stuff like, "Goodbye, friends. Please don't be mad at me." He talked about the literacy rate being low and the longest war in U.S. history. It was all very rambling and strange. And he ended it with, "P.S. Plead the Fifth."
Oh, wow.
And get this, his MySpace page had a photo of a handgun sitting on a document called United States History.
So clearly some symbolism going on there.
Yeah. Anyway, later that morning, he went to Walmart to buy ammo. But for some reason, he didn't buy it at that Walmart. He went to a different one.
That's odd. Do we know why?
Not really, but on the way to the second Walmart, he got pulled over for running a red light.
Did they arrest him?
No, they just gave him a warning and let him go.
Wow, if only they knew.
Right. So he buys the ammo and then takes a taxi to the Safeway, where Gabby Giffords was having a public meeting with her constituents.
And that's where it all happened.
Yeah. Around 10:10 a.m., Loughner walks up to Giffords and shoots her at point-blank range. Then he starts shooting at everyone around her.
Chaos.
Total chaos. 6 people dead, 13 injured. Giffords was in critical condition.
It's amazing anyone survived.
I know, right? Luckily, some bystanders were able to tackle Loughner and hold him until the police arrived.
Those people are heroes.
Absolutely. And when they arrested him, he apparently said, "I plead the fifth."
Wow, so he was aware of his rights at least.
It seems so. And, the mugshot that they took of him, people were saying he looked like he was smirking, like he was enjoying the attention.
So creepy.
Yeah. Okay. So after the shooting, they took him to federal court and charged him with a bunch of crimes. Attempted assassination of a congresswoman, murder of a federal employee, attempted murder of other federal employees.
So a whole slew of charges.
Yeah. On January 19th, they formally indicted him on 3 of the charges and denied him bail. He was held in solitary confinement.
So no contact with anyone.
Right. Later, they transferred him to the federal prison in Tucson, and then they appointed this lawyer, Judy Clark, to represent him. She's pretty famous for working on big murder and terrorism cases.
So a high-profile attorney for a high-profile case.
Exactly. And because Judge Roll was one of the victims, all the federal judges in Arizona recused themselves from the case.
Conflict of interest.
Yeah, so they assigned a judge from San Diego to handle it.
Makes sense.
And while all this was going on, Arizona prosecutors said they were going to file their own charges against Loughner, too, for the non-federal victims.
So he was facing charges on both the federal and state level.
Yeah. But Arizona law is different. They don't have a not guilty by reason of insanity verdict. They have guilty but insane.
Oh, so that would change the whole defense strategy.
Absolutely. Anyway, Loughner initially pleaded not guilty to all the federal charges, but they kept adding more charges, and by March 9th, he was facing 49 counts.
49.
Yeah, and he pleaded not guilty to all of them. That's when things got complicated.
In what way?
Well, in May of 2011, a bunch of doctors evaluated him and determined he wasn't mentally competent to stand trial.
Because of the schizophrenia.
Right. They diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia, so they stopped the legal proceedings and sent him for psychiatric treatment.
So the goal was to get him well enough to understand the charges against him and participate in his own defense.
Exactly. And there was this one court hearing where he said that he thought Gabby Giffords was dead, which really shows how delusional he was.
Still detached from reality.
Yeah. And then there was this big legal fight about whether they could force him to take medication.
Right, I remember hearing about that.
So a judge initially said that the prison could give him meds against his will to try and restore his competency. But then an appeals court overturned that ruling. They said since he hadn't been convicted yet, he had the right to refuse treatment.
It's a tough situation. On one hand, he needs help, but on the other hand, he has rights.
Exactly. But the prison wasn't done. They started giving him this antipsychotic drug called risperidone, but they argued it was for a different reason.
What was their reasoning this time?
They said he was a danger to himself and others in prison because of his mental illness, so they had to medicate him to keep everyone safe, and the courts agreed with them.
So the forced medication continued.
Yeah. And eventually on August 7, 2012, he was deemed competent to stand trial.
So after over a year of treatment.
Yep. And then something interesting happened. At a hearing, he changed his plea to guilty, but only for 19 of the 49 charges.
What was the deal there?
He agreed to plead guilty to avoid the death penalty. Apparently, a forensic psychologist who evaluated him said that since he'd been on the meds, he was showing remorse and seemed to be getting better.
So he was finally understanding the gravity of his actions.
It seems so. And this plea deal was a big deal. Gabby Giffords, her husband Mark Kelly, Ron Barber, who was injured in the shooting, the Attorney General, and the U.S. Attorney, they all agreed to it. But they also talked to all the victims and their families before making the decision.
So everyone was on board with this.
Yeah. And by pleading guilty, Loughner also gave up his right to appeal the verdict.
So this was it. No more legal battles.
Right. And then on November 8, 2012, he was sentenced. 7 consecutive life sentences plus 140 years, no parole.
Wow. So he's never getting out.
Never. And he also had to pay $19 million in restitution, like $1 million for each victim.
That's a huge amount.
Yeah, and they took away his guns and any chance of him profiting from his story.
Like selling book rights or anything like that.
Exactly. And after the federal case was done, the state of Arizona said they weren't going to prosecute him separately. They wanted to let the victims and the community move on. They felt justice had been served.
Understandable.
And as of 2015, he's been serving his sentence at the Federal Medical Center in Rochester, Minnesota. It's a prison that specializes in treating inmates with medical needs.
So he's getting the mental health care he needs.
Hopefully. So there we have it. The story of Jared Lee Loughner. From a troubled background to mental illness, conspiracy theories, the horrific shooting, and the long road through the legal system.
We covered a lot of ground today.
We did. It's a complex and disturbing story, and it leaves us with a lot to think about.
It really does. And just to be clear, everything we've talked about is based on the information we found in the news reports, legal documents, and background information we collected.
Absolutely. We wanted to present the facts as objectively as possible, and now we turn to you, the listener.
After hearing all of this, what questions do you have? How do you make sense of this tragedy?
What does it tell us about the connections between mental health, societal influences, and violence? We'd love to hear your thoughts.
This is a case that raises more questions than it answers.
It certainly does, and maybe those unanswered questions are the ones that stick with us the longest.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back with another one soon.
Until then, keep thinking critically and engaging with the world around you.
And take care of yourselves.
Absolutely.
See you next time.
See you then.